Please, my daughter, marry him, Morenike pleaded, her voice carrying the weight of years of sacrifice. He will bring good fortune to our family. You know I spent all my resources sending you to the best schools. I made sure you had all the best things in life. And now it's time for me to reap the fruit of my labor. Don't you think so, Imade? Imade inhaled deeply, her fingers instinctively pinching the bridge of her nose as frustration swelled inside of her. Her shoulders slumped. Yes, mother, I know you deserve the world for all you have done, but you cannot blame me for what is happening now. I just cannot get a job. Her voice cracked slightly as she exhaled, her breath shaky from pent-up emotions. Morenike sighed, rubbing her hands together before folding them across her chest. I understand, my child. I know it hasn't been easy, but getting married will help you overcome this financial challenge. He will take care of you and me. Imade shook her head, her eyebrows knitting together in defiance. She sat up straighter. Mom, you know I have chosen a path for myself. There's a stage I want to reach before even thinking about marriage. And by the way, I'm just 25 years. What is the rush? Morenike sat up, her eyes dark with determination. I will just go straight to the point. Alhaji Adebambo had asked for your hand in marriage, and I have given him my word of agreement. The word struck Imade like a thunderbolt. You did what? Her voice rose in anger, disbelief clouding her face. How could you, mother? Morenike barely flinched. Do you even know who Adebambo is? He is a very wealthy man with a net worth of 5 billion naira. It's a privilege for him to approach his family for marriage. Imade clenched her fist. You accepted a marriage proposal on my behalf from a man almost twice the age of my father, a man who already has 10 wives. Morenike shook her head. You don't even know your father's real age. She leaned back slightly and continued nonchalantly. By the way, he has 15 wives, not 10. Imade's mouth fell open as she laughed at the unfunny situation. So that is supposed to make me feel better. Her stomach churning in revulsion. Mommy, she whispered in shock. I cannot believe you. She turned sharply on her heels and stormed out of the house. Morenike watched her leave, her mouth curving into a knowing smile. You will soon see the advantage of this marriage, she muttered under her breath. Days passed. The silent war between mother and daughter continued. Imade buried herself in job applications, sending her CVs to different companies across Lagos and beyond. Her mother, sensing her resistance, changed tactics. She stopped feeding her. She no longer responded to her greetings. Some nights, she even locked her out when she returned home late from job interviews. But Imade endured. She had always been resilient. She had graduated with top grades, A's and A's+, one of the best results in her set. Yet, she found herself trapped in an endless loop of rejection. Each interview followed a similar pattern. She would sit across from a well-dressed man, hope flickering in her heart, only to find that hope to be crushed by lustful eyes and inappropriate advances. Wow, the interviewer would say, flipping through her CV. You are overqualified for this position, but I can offer you a bigger role if you let me tap you. He would say while licking his lips, his gaze lingering on her body. Imade would stiffen, her stomach turning into disgust. I'm sorry, sir, but that's not why I'm here. The man would lean back, a knowing chuckle escaping his lips. This is Lagos. It's give and take. Give me what I want, and I will give you what you need. Imade would push her chair back, stand tall, and walk out without another word. Her dreams were clear. After getting her degree, she planned to work, save, pursue her master's degree, and later her PhD abroad. Only then would she even consider marriage. But nearly 2 years had passed, and nothing had changed. One morning, as Imade stepped out of her room, still groggy from sleep, Morenike stood in the center of the living room, gripping a knife tightly against her wrist. I will end my life, she declared, her voice trembling with emotion. Then you can enjoy your life in peace. Imade's heart pounded in her chest. Has it gotten to this, Mom? She asked, her eyes wide with fear. Morenike nodded, her grip on the knife tightening. Alhaji told me yesterday that he cannot wait for you any longer. If you do not marry him by this weekend, he will find another wife. And if that happens, my blood is on your head. She took a shaky breath and continued. Even after I am dead, I will torment you in your sleep. If you marry another man, I will torment and kill him. If you have children, I will take them. I will frustrate you until you take your own life, just as I have taken mine. Imade swallowed hard. She knew her mother loved her life too much to actually kill herself. But what if she was wrong? Tears burned her eyes as she whispered, You should stop this madness. What is wrong with you? If you love him so much, why don't you just marry him? Morenike's lips curled into satisfaction. He chose you. She pressed the knife against her skin, drawing a thin line of blood. Imade screamed, rushing towards her, but her mother pointed the knife at her instead. Stay back. Answer me now. Will you agree or not? Imade felt the weight of her mother's manipulation, pressing down on her like an iron fist. She could not bear the thought of people blaming her for her mother's death. Her voice came out hoarse and broken. I agree. Morenike let out a victorious sigh and dropped the knife. Good choice. Imade turned away, tears streaming down her face. She retreated to her room, ignoring her mother's smug smile and celebratory dance. Later that night, Imade laid on her bed, staring at the ceiling when her phone rang. It was Olamide, her best friend from college. As soon as she heard her voice, Olamide knew something was wrong. After listening to everything, Olamide sighed, Bestie, I'm so sorry. But honestly, if you had married my brother when he asked, we wouldn't be here now. Imade sighed. You know why I didn't accept him. Oh, you wanted to be independent, but he promised to support you. Imade remained silent. Don't worry, maybe Alhaji will die in a few months, and you will be free, Olamide laughed. Imade closed her eyes, wishing she could escape. The morning of her wedding soon arrived, faster than Imade had hoped. She sat still, staring blankly at her reflection as makeup artists and designers fluttered around her, brushing, powdering, pinning and adjusting. Their voices blended into a dull-hum background noise in her suffocating reality. Her face was a perfect canvas of beauty, her gown of masterpiece of lace and pearls. But inside, she was hollow. She barely reacted as hands turned her this way and that, fixing gele, smoothing out beads on her dress. She looked stunning, one of the designers whispered to another. Of course, the other replied, nodding in admiration. Alhaji chose well. At the mention of Alhaji, Imade's stomach churned. Moments later, she was called outside, where Adebambo stood waiting for her. His frail frame shook slightly with excitement, with a wild smile on his face. He extended his hand and she hesitantly placed hers in his palm, trying to ignore how clammy it felt. As the wedding music played, Adebambo, despite his obvious lack of freedom, attempted to dance. His bony arms failed, and for a moment, Imade thought he might collapse. She wished he would. She barely moved. The look in her eyes was murderous. If looks could kill, Adebambo would have been 6 feet under before the ceremony ended. But he danced on, oblivious to her disgust. The wedding was short. She had insisted on a quiet ceremony, one that lasted only a few hours instead of a traditional overnight celebration. Once it was over, she packed her bags and followed her husband to his mansion, knowing her fate was sealed. The ride to her new home was painfully silent. Imade stared out of the car window, stealing glances at Adebambo every now and then. The wrinkles on his face, the saggy skin. He reminded her of Gollum from the Lord of the Rings. She gagged and quickly looked away. They soon arrived at a massive house, a mansion too large. Some of his wives lived there, and as she stepped out of the car, they were already waiting. The elderly wives greeted her warmly, smiling in welcome. The younger ones, however, were different. Their eyes burned with jealousy, especially the 16th wife, Fumi. She stood with her arms crossed, her lips pursed in displeasure. Imade didn't blame her. Who would want to share a husband with yet another woman, especially one young enough to be his granddaughter? Food had been prepared in her honor, but she had no appetite. Instead, she excused herself and went to her room. Surprised at how beautifully furnished it was, she sat on the edge of her bed and exhaled. Then dread set in. Tonight, she had saved herself for her husband, but how was she supposed to give herself to this thing? She whispered and waited, but Adebambo never came. Relief flooded her, and that was how the first few days passed. No visit from him, no expectations. The only one who showed any hostility was Fumi, but as the days passed, even she seemed to soften. One evening, as Imade was scrolling through her laptop, searching for job opportunities, there was a knock on her door. She opened it, and there stood Fumi, a sly smile on her lips. "What are you doing here?" Imade asked, arms crossed. "To mingle," Fumi replied, pushing past her and making herself comfortable on the couch. She brought drinks and snacks, which she casually began eating. Imade eyed her warily. "I don't trust you. I saw the way you looked at me on my first day here. You don't like me." Fumi folded her arms and said, "Can you blame me? I thought you came to steal my daddy from me." Imade's stomach turned. "Your daddy? Aren't you one of his wives?" Fumi grinned mischievously. "But daddy is what I call him in the bedroom." She bit her lips, a dreamy expression crossing her face. "Ew, please stop," Imade shuddered. Fumi burst into laughter. "That's because he hasn't handled you yet. Once Adebambo gets hold of you, you will never want another man again. And besides, I don't need to worry for any of my expenses." Imade cringed. "For the last time, why are you here?" Fumi sighed and leaned in. "I wanted to know, why did Adebambo marry you?" Imade's shoulders dropped. "It was a forced marriage. My mother made me do it." Fumi's expression turned serious. "Then why did you agree?" Imade clenched her jaw. She was going to kill herself. "And you believed her?" Imade's eyes darkened. "She nearly did." Fumi shook her head. "If you regret it so much, then leave." "I can't," Imade said bitterly. "My mother thinks this is a blessing for our family." Fumi sighed. "I see. But tell me, where has Adebambo been recently? He hardly sees me anymore." "I don't know," Imade said honestly. Fumi looked at her laptop at what she was doing and told her to tell Adebambo to get her a job. But Imade refused. And Fumi wrote a number on a piece of paper and told her to call the number whenever she needed a job. 6 months passed. Adebambo was still absent, though Imade preferred it that way. Fumi's question echoed in her mind. Why had he married her? Her mother barely called her. Whenever they spoke, she was traveling. Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, living her best life, while Imade lived in uncertainty. The only good thing was the hefty monthly allowance she received. One day, she decided to visit her mother, who had just returned from her trip. She found Morenike glowing, happiness radiating from her. Something was different, but Imade ignored the feeling. A few weeks later, she visited again. This time, she noticed it. Her mother looked plumper, her skin shinier. Was she pregnant? Imade asked herself, but said to herself that her mother was too old to be pregnant. Imade didn't ask. Their relationship had been strained since the knife incident. Then came the day she needed her certificate for a job interview. She was sure she had left it in her mother's house. She took a cab there, expecting a quick visit. but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. She stepped inside and froze. There on the couch was Adebambo, naked, thrusting into her mother from behind. Their moans filled the room. Imade felt her world shatter. Her mother, the woman who had forced her into this nightmare, with her own husband. She stood in silence, unable to move. Then they finished and turned, only to see her standing there. It's not what it looks like, Morenike gasped, but Imade didn't stay to listen. She turned and walked out, her mother's frantic voice following her, but she didn't look back. Pain, raw and deep, clawed at her chest. She got into a cab and told the driver to go. Her phone rang endlessly. Calls, texts, but she switched it off. She checked into a hotel and called her best friend Olamide. When Olamide arrived, she listened in shock. Out of everything in this world, Olamide whispered, shaking her head, I would never expect your mother to do this. Imade closed her eyes. Neither would she. Imade stepped out of the hotel, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin. She adjusted the strap of her handbag, inhaled deeply, and flagged down a cab. She was leaving. She returned to Adebambo's mansion, not as a wife, not as a woman seeking reconciliation, but as someone ready to erase the past. Her footsteps were firm as she walked inside, ignoring the curious gaze of other wives. She packed her belongings quickly, stuffing clothes, documents, and essentials into her suitcase with swift, determined hands. That night, she booked a flight to Ghana. As the plane took off, she stared out the window. The light of Lagos twinkled below, fading as they soared into unknown. In Ghana, she found solace. It was there that she dialed the number Fumi had given her. A woman's voice answered, polite but professional. Within minutes, Imade learned there was an international job opening, and they were willing to help her with her visa process. Her heart raced with excitement, a new beginning. A few days later, as Imade scrolled through her phone, a call came in. Fumi, why did you live like that? Fumi asked. Imade didn't feel the need to hide anything, so she told her everything. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the disgust. Fumi listened, sighing in frustration. I knew your mother had issues, but this is too much. They talked for hours, their voices intertwining in the quiet night. For the first time, Imade realized that Fumi was no longer just another one of Adebambo's wife. She was a friend. Weeks later, she got her visa approved. She begged Olamide to help her retrieve her certificate from her mother's house, which she did and Webby to Imade in Ghana. Without looking back, she left Ghana for Germany. Life abroad was beautiful. The air felt lighter, the streets broader, and the opportunities endless. It was there that she met Deji. He was dark, tall, and strikingly handsome. His presence was magnetic. His laughter infectious. At first, their interactions were brief, passing glances at the train station, an exchange of polite nods, but soon Imade realized she was waiting for him. She found herself anticipating the moment their paths would cross. And then, one lucky day, he approached her. Their first conversation was effortless, flowing like an undisturbed stream. Conversations turned into coffee dates. Coffee dates turned into long evening walks, and soon he asked her out. She said yes. They were the perfect couple, elegant, radiant, and deeply in love. One evening, as they sat on a park bench, Deji squeezing her hand. I want to visit Nigeria, he said. Imade hesitated. It had been over 4 years since she left. And though she was happy, there was still loose ends to tie up, especially with Adebambo. After some thought, she agreed to accompany him. When they landed in Lagos, they went their separate ways. Imade knew what she had to do. She needed to get a divorce. She took a cab to Adebambo's compound, but when she arrived, her heart stopped. Deji was there. Confusion twisted her insides as she watched him greet the people around. And then she heard the most shocking thing. Deji was Adebambo's 10th wife's son. Her stomach churned. The world spun. She had fallen in love with the son of the man she had once been married to. She stumbled back, gripping her chest. How could this be? Tears burned her eyes. She turned and ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. That night she called Fumi and Olamide, her voice shaky as she recounted everything. Get the divorce and cut ties with Deji, Olamide advised. Fumi agreed. You need to move on. But how? Deji wasn't just another man. He was her whole existence, the man who made her feel alive again. But she knew what she had to do. With trembling hands, she dialed Deji's number. We need to break up, she whispered. Imade, what are you talking about? Deji's voice cracked. She swallowed hard and told him everything. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you this before. I was afraid you were going to leave me, she cried. You should have, but we cannot change the past. I cannot believe that I have been in love with my stepmother all this while, he whispered in a broken voice. Bye, Deji, she said and ended the call. Pressing the phone against her chest as sobs racked her body. Imade had not spoken to her mother since the day she had caught her with Adebambo, but now she needed closure. When she arrived at Morenike's house, she noticed the changes. Her mother looked well, but there was stress behind her eyes. Upon seeing her, Morenike rushed forward, arms open. Imade stepped back. No! Morenike froze. I'm getting a divorce, Imade stated. I'm not here for permission. I'm just telling you. Her mother's eyes widened. Then, she sighed deeply. Sit down. There's something you must know. They sat down as Imade soon saw a boy who was barely 4 years old run into the house. He bore an uncanny resemblance to Adebambo. Her eyes widened as her head came in terms with what she was seeing. I had been betrothed to your father by our families. There was no love, only duty. When you were 5, your father died in an accident. His family wanted me to stay, but I refused. No wonder, whenever I asked about my father's people, she would ignore my question, Imade thought as her mother continued. My family rejected me, and so I fled to Lagos, where I started my tailoring business. Years later, I met Adebambo, the man I have always loved. With time spent, our old love rekindled. But he had many wives. She continued, her voice filled with regret. I was too old to be his 13th wife, but we kept our love hidden. Imade's breath caught in her throat. People started suspecting and spreading news about him having an extramarital affair with me, even though he had so many wives. So I came up with an idea. Morenike confessed. Adebambo should marry you. That way, he could visit me as though he was visiting his in-law. Imade's heart pounded. You were never truly married to Adebambo, her mother concluded. Your family never took the bride price. Instead, my family accepted mine when they found out how wealthy Adebambo was. Silence stretched between them. Imade exhaled shakily. She didn't know why, but relief washed over her. But she was still angry. Her mother's affair that resulted to a child had damaged whatever would have happened between her and Deji. She badly wished she could turn the hands of time. Honestly, you do not deserve my forgiveness. You used me as a pawn in your little game of love, she said as she cried and walked out of the house. Morenike's unshed tears began to fall freely down her face. As Imade walked away, she thought about how her mother used her without a second thought. She felt the pain of lying to Deji and betraying his trust. With the truth revealed, everything changed. Fumi had become a crucial part of Imade's life, surprising her with kindness. She, along with Olamide, talked about everything in their WhatsApp group chat. "This story is wild," Olamide texted. Olamide invited Imade to stay at her house for the time being until it was time for her to travel back to Germany. She felt so heartbroken that she would cry every day and night. When Folarin, Olamide's brother, saw her again, all the feelings he had buried deep within him resurfaced again. She had become much more beautiful than he remembered. He would cook for her, convince her for them to see a movie, and even took her out sometime. Within 3 months, Imade felt a bit better and it was time for her to travel back. During her time in Germany, she and Folarin would talk for long hours, and Imade was beginning to fall head over heels in love with him. She didn't know he was so mature and fun to be with. You never know until you try, her subconscious will remind her. 6 months later, Folarin proposed to her for them to date and she agreed, without a second thought. He soon started his visa process, which was denied. He really wanted to see her. And Imade, seeing how much he craved for her, visited him in Nigeria. Since she can work from home sometimes. At the airport, Folarin went down on one knee and proposed, and Imade said yes. It was one of the happiest days of her life yet. As they kissed, tears fell from her face. She had finally found a place that she could call home. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Please don't forget to like, comment, and share. See you in our next one. Bye.